the PowerShell Podcast.
Over 1 million hits and counting.
The podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. And in this episode, we're going to talk with Graham Stringfellow. He's a longtime friend, former coworker, PowerSheller OnRamp graduate. We're going to talk to him and learn about his journey, some of the things he's learned along the way, get some insights, and tap into our shared history because there is a bit of an overlap. I did work with him for a long time. He currently works at my previous employer, so he's dealing with some of my old PowerShell that I've written, so we'll hear about how that's doing and so much more. But I want to start with some news. So, cool announcement you might have heard about is sudo for Windows is here. Now, I haven't checked it out, but I have a link in the show notes. If you do check it out, let me know how it goes for you. I'm curious to see. It seems like Microsoft is taking sort of a more developer-friendly approach. I guess you could say they have been for a while, but by making more things available on a Windows device for developers, cool to see. Another thing I wanted to highlight, and this is, I've been a fan of Mark Ragg for a long time, and I think I've plugged a few of his things before, but he has a new currency converter module, and he has a post about it, and I think he uses it to check on Azure pricing, but he makes use of the exchange rate API to perform currency conversions with PowerShell. So check out that module if you need to convert some currencies, or if you just want to check on the status of that. Now it's time to plug the inner circle. Here at the PowerShell Podcast, we have our own channel of the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ, link in show notes, where you can tap in with us, get the lowdown, talk about episodes, talk about the PowerShell you're working with, sort of in a more intimate setting. I really appreciate everyone who's joined there recently from the podcast, had a lot of great conversations. And on that same note, shout out to Mark Go, giving me a lot of great feedback, suggestions. I definitely want to see his submission for the Jeff Hicks PowerShell Scripting Challenge, which I guess I'll plug. Link in show notes. Jeff Hicks has a challenge going out to the end of February, where if you read the gist, you can read about it. You are going to create some functions to query GitHub and return some things, and the winner gets some free swag. So check that out. I have a post on socials announcing all of that, and all the details can be found on Jeff Hicks' GitHub. Next up, we have a little pickleball update. I know sometimes I talk about pickleball. Well, guess what? I had a tournament on Sunday, and you'll be so pleased to know that I did not win a single game. So here I am. You win some, you lose some. Just a little update for all my pickleball friends out there. There was a cool graph that was shared. Some insights from Stack Overflow. You can check the link below. It is a graph showing the percentage of questions asked on Stack Overflow. And a cool feature of this is since 2022, PowerShell has been more popular in terms of questions being asked on Stack Overflow than Bash. So cool to see that. I love seeing PowerShell continue to grow. I know we talk about billions of sessions each month, but always great reinforcement that the skills that you're learning here by listening to this podcast, by being engaged in the community, by writing scripts and automating your workload are actually going to pay off in the long term. And you can look forward to continuing your PowerShell journey long into your career. PowerShell tip of the week time. So this was shared on Twitter, and it's a very practical guide. So there is the PowerShell practice and style guide. It shows you the best practices you should follow when writing PowerShell. And if you're starting to venture out of the command phase and starting to write scripts and things like that, that you intend to share and be maintained by maybe when somebody takes over your job after you leave or you have coworkers, you want to make sure that you're following the best practices and knowing what they are, because you may not know. So check out that PowerShell practice and style guide. Bookmark it for sure, to be honest with you, because it's the kind of thing you're going to have to refer back to. So I posed a question on Twitter. I said, what is the most challenging part of learning GitHub? And friend of the show and former guest, I am Jacoby, responded to my question with, I'll try to answer by asking another question. What is the best way to teach it? PowerShell 5, 7, Core, on Windows 10, 11, question mark. And I like to take the approach when you're dealing with people who are newer to PowerShell. First of all, why do they want to learn it? Are they supporting an environment of 5.1? Do they already have something installed in their machine? If they already have 5.1 and they're managing 5.1 devices, I would just get started with that. If they don't, if they're on a different OS, or if they already have access to PowerShell 7, I'd recommend going there. But in the beginning, there's not going to be a lot of differences, right? The commands generally work the same. The core commands are very similar. So just meet them where they are. The easiest way to get started, to remove as many hurdles as you can. And once you start getting some value out of PowerShell and are ready to take things to the next level, then you can get everything honed in. But you want to remove barriers to entry, in my opinion, when it comes to this. But now it is time to introduce our guest, longtime friend. We sort of came up in IT together. We've seen each other's journeys for a while now. So welcome to the podcast, Graham Stringfellow. How are you doing?
Hey, Andrew. Hey, good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's. I think I saw you last night at the Gainesville PowerShell user group. We had Sean Wheeler come by. Thanks to everybody who joined us from the podcast there. He gave a good talk about Git and GitHub.
Yeah, that was excellent talk. I have the distinct pleasure and privilege of saying I knew Andrew way back when. We go back like time machines.
Yeah, I shared this on a recent podcast about sort of the way I got started in the PowerShell world, and a large part of that was me earning the scholarship. And I believe, Graham, we worked together whenever I got that email. I was at a conference with a couple of coworkers, and I don't think you were at that one, but I'm pretty sure we worked together whenever that whole thing sort of transpired, right?
Yeah, correct. So you kind of laid the groundwork or the template for success. You encouraged me to get started in PowerShell, and I got to follow along, kind of live vicariously through you as you progressed in your PowerShell journey. And I remember that you started blogging, and you blogged about that experience, and that was I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit jealous that you got to go.
But, fast forward a little bit, as luck would have it, I mean, what situation did you find yourself in?
Yeah, so if you'll recall, with your guidance, I applied for the OnRamp Scholarship, and I actually won in 2020. But that was a COVID year, so we didn't have Summit. But I applied again a couple years later and got accepted, and just was very fortunate to get the opportunity to go to the DevOps Global Summit in Seattle.
Nice. Yeah, I was there too. I saw it. So it's really cool for me to see that happen too. And I think they're giving out a lot more scholarships these days. Whenever I went, I was the first kind of thing. And now I think they do mini scholarships each year, which is really cool to see. New people getting the opportunity to go out to Seattle, meet some awesome people, really get engaged with the community. And you got to do the OnRamp program, which I think is a specific series of talks designed for people to sort of really on-ramp and do things best practices. Less PowerShell focused, but more like general skills and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right. So when I talk about it, it still doesn't even seem real, that I got that opportunity. But along with several other people, the PowerShell.org and DevOps Global Summit paid for us to go to this OnRamp workshop. And it's just, I tell everybody who will listen to me, tell them about it. If you're getting started in PowerShell, getting started in DevOps, it's a fantastic opportunity. I encourage everyone to apply. I'm just so blown away that I got to do that. And I think it speaks to PowerShell.org's larger mission of not just apostolicizing for PowerShell, talking about how great it is, but also trying to elevate people up. Like I'm, a nobody from Hicksville, and I got the opportunity to go sit in a classroom for a week with legends like Jeff Hicks, Dave Carroll, Stephen Judd, Mike Kanakos, Phil Bossman, Josh King, Stevie Coaster, James Ruskin, Tech Trainer Tim, Michael Bender, and a very famous PowerShell podcast host as well. So it's just an incredible experience. It wasn't, I think a lot of other people have given this feedback as well. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a PowerShell boot camp where we just learned about PowerShell for a week, but it was a lot of the other tools that we needed to be successful. And that's partly DevOps, partly using Git, soft skills, so a lot of things besides PowerShell, but PowerShell too.
Nice. So how's it been since then? And do you have any plans in April this year?
I do. I'm very happy to announce and fortunate to be able to attend PowerShell the hallway track this year, not just the OnRamp program.
Hallway track. That's what I like to do. No, that's awesome. So you're going to go back. You convinced your employer, which I know your boss. He was my boss. So your employer to take you to send you this year. So that's really exciting. It's cool when people are able to have employers who see the value of something like PowerShell Summit and have people who are willing to take what they learn and apply it like you have. So very cool. Now, can we go back more? Because I feel like there's so much we missed. How long do we work together? Like 5 years or so?
Yeah, something like that.
4 years maybe?
Yeah. So I wasn't completely unaware of PowerShell when I started working with you. I did go to the community college and get a network administration degree. So they did touch on PowerShell. I think maybe they said, said essentially just verb, noun, adverb, and maybe add Windows capability or some random
Oh yeah.
commandlet, but without going any deeper into that. So um, Andrew we were working together, he said, "Hey man, this PowerShell thing's going to be huge. It's going to be big. Got to look into it." So with your help and with a lot of independent study, I started learning PowerShell 101. I started cutting my teeth on, of course, PowerShell in a month lunches at your recommendation. There's so many good resources out there. So I just started digging in, and with lots of repetition, it started to click a little bit.
Yeah. That's so cool, man. Oh, dude, it feels so wholesome. I'm so happy to get to talk to you on the podcast now. It's been I think a couple of years since we last were on the same team. Almost 3 years actually. Geez, time. That's a thing. Um, but we talk about a lot of good things about me, but I spoke at Summit in I think 21 or something like that about empowering your team to learn PowerShell and how I made this stumbling block that I think other people have made where they sort of box themselves in as the expert who knows every answer. They're not as open to collaboration. They're more like the secret. They like thinking of themselves as like the secret genius who kind of gets everything done because they know the language. And I realized, and you experience this from the other end of like someone being unwilling to help. And then I think eventually I realized like, yo, that's just my like insecurities showing. That's not the best way to actually do what I'm trying to do, which is automate my troubles away. So I think eventually I kind of came around to like, whoa, I need to really embrace collaboration and really bring the people who are using the tools I'm writing up because I can't write a billion tools. But if I have a team where everyone is proficient in PowerShell and is able to make small PRs and update things and so on and so forth, it's so much better. Plus, if I leave one day, the thought of me losing all that automation and having that time be for naught, not like I'm financially going to benefit from it, but it just doesn't seem like the right way to go about things. So then eventually I was like, yo, I need to really collaborate. And what was that like for you to kind of experience that process? I'm sure it was pretty frustrating at points.
Well, that's putting it mildly. Yeah, from my perspective, I started out as a help desk, and Andrew was my boss. And there were, it, I was just IT admin when Andrew was a sysadmin. So he was really looked up to him. He was doing all the things that I wanted to do. Instead of installing printers and just general help desk tickets, he was working on systems and creating policy. So from that perspective, it was not unheard of to hear Andrew, on the trampoline when he joined the Teams call. He was work from home before it was cool, so he was doing all the cool stuff while I got stuck with a lot of the unpleasant day to day stuff. So it's just been amazing to watch your journey, watch you grow, and you were starting a local PowerShell user group even before your time at PDQ. So I think that's the wisdom of experience, right? Is you learn as you go that you get more done with a team, and that it's partly a selfish act to give back to the community because it reinforces the stuff that you already know, and helps you grow and develop as well. So just being able to kind of live tangentially to you and watch all that happen has been incredible.
But what was it like learning PowerShell and sort of seeing that and being part of the tool making? Because I think I got a bunch of people on the team involved in writing tools to some extent. And
Yeah.
now you're maintaining those tools and developing new tools now that I'm gone. That's pretty fulfilling. How's that for you?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. So that's kind of some of the magic of PowerShell, right? Is that you can create tools and make other people's jobs easier, more satisfying, more productive. So that part of it is awesome. And it's like you said, there's still automations that you created that are still running. And you kind of I've inherited this code base that you left, and it's really interesting that you can see actually like your progression. As you learned more and became more proficient, how the code improved, and that I'm would be lying if I said you didn't leave some big shoes to fill when you moved on, but it's been an awesome journey.
Yeah. I can say, when we were doing the pre-show before we started recording, we talked about like an onboarding module kind of thing that you're still making use of. And I can say that I know for a fact that is a hard to read module that was not really written in the best of ways. Some of those functions are insane, way too bloated. Have you had to make any changes to code? Have you seen anything you're like, what the heck was Andrew thinking? What was he doing here?
Not that I think all the code was pretty flawless. No, nothing like that. But the user management module specifically, as you're talking about, was many thousand lines of code. And we have had to make some changes, as we've moved away from MSOL commandlets to use the Graph API. There have been changes and stuff that I've had to do to maintain it, but it's largely still intact. Like a lot of original code is in there. Your name is still attached to it, of course.
That's what I need. Each time that script executes, I just want to make sure that the comment is somewhere deep in the script block logging where it says my name. That's what I'm going for, event logs.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, it's that a tool like that can outlast you, whenever you move on, and continue to add value is pretty awesome.
Yeah. And it's fun because as we do things for our jobs, we can do them the simple way that gets it done once, which is fine for some things. And, sometimes you do have to do that. But when you're able to sort of step back and focus on the bigger picture and actually automating problems for good and creating maintainable-ish tools, right? Everything's going to be a little bit challenging. There's going to be a little bit of a curve to supporting things, but as maintainable as you can with hopefully good documentation, and even better if you train the people on your team about these tools. And if you develop a new tool and your team has the bandwidth, you give a small presentation on it where you sort of explain the different functions, how it would be used. And I think this is a big one that I learned a lot was teach your team PowerShell, make sure they understand the basics, get help and all that, get help examples, and then make sure that the examples that your team is going to do regularly with your commands are all in examples. If you want your command to do something and your team to actually use it, add an example that they can just copy and paste. We also, whenever I was working there, we did some variety of like creating tools with like a GUI interface. And I think those are always kind of hit or miss because distribution is sort of a pain. Yeah. And it's a GUI, so it's like ooey,
Yeah, well, your spirit is still in the walls. I feel like very much that I'm living in the house that Andrew built. He was an early adopter of PowerShell and a driving force for DevOps and implementing those kind of best practices. So rightly or wrongly, you sometimes even get blamed for errors that, maybe we just don't have an answer for. So your spirit is definitely still alive.
Nice. Well, that's cool to hear. But I think another topic that we sort of wanted to cover was I also, and I mentioned this on the podcast a few times, probably the biggest PowerShell project I ever did where I sort of learned the most and felt like, oh, hey, I actually know PowerShell now, was a module for a ticketing system that we got called HelpDesk. Mm-hmm. And it had a REST API, which is the reason why I chose it. It was affordable compared to for our size. And it had an API. And I was like, okay, API, I know I can do that with PowerShell. Ended up having to learn a lot about APIs and PowerShell modules and wrote a big old thing that we could start using for automations. And I think that it's huge if you're a sysadmin and you're able to incorporate your ticket system in your automations. I mean, that's where your work is oftentimes being generated from, is the ticketing system. So if you have a way to plug into it, query your tickets and see what sort of proactive steps you can take, I think it goes a long way. And you were mentioning that you still make use of that module, or I guess the environment does.
Yeah, exactly. So in addition to our onboarding user management module that you created, it relies on the HelpDesk PS module that you authored. So that's our ITSM solution. And new hire requests come in as a form that gets completed in the web. And then that HelpDesk PS module is able to make API calls and then retrieve information from the form and then pass that into the actual user account creation.
Yeah. So it's sort of, I think of it like by using the ticketing system like this, we sort of have a front end that we can present to customers, mm-hmm. and we can do specific things based on what they request. And it's sort of like an automation platform of sorts, because this ticketing system can also send REST API calls. So I would also create like Azure Function APIs to do certain things in our environment based on new users. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do there once you're plugged into the ticketing system, all the way down to, I know that I was keeping track of how much time automation saved by like adding a little note to a ticket, because these are things that sort of matter when it comes to your manager and reviews and stuff. And it's just an extra line of code you have to add to keep track of time, whether that be with a file on your network or with some kind of other way of keeping track. I highly recommend keeping track of how much impact your automations have when possible.
Yeah, that's great advice. So that you can measure that, and when they, when it comes time for a review, then you can, put that in front of somebody, a decision maker.
Now, back in the day when I was writing this module, did I have you write any commands?
I don't recall that specifically, but possible.
Did we pair program at all when you were working there?
A little bit. So I, as you've talked about many times on your show, I fell for that classic blunder of comparing my journey to others. So I was, kind of mired in help desk tickets, watching you do amazing things, go to Summit, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit jealous. But with the wisdom of experience, you learn that you shouldn't be comparing your journey to other people. Just need to compare it to where you were, a week ago, a month ago. So now, with the benefit of hindsight, I realize that I should have been following you, shadowing you everywhere you went, and trying to absorb some of that, genius that you have. But fortunately, we did have a nice handoff, and you kind of passed the baton to me and showed me some of your automation secrets. And I'm trying to pay it forward and do that same thing for the team that we have now.
Nice. Yeah, that's
Let me just add that I'm very lucky that I work with some very smart people. Because I know a little bit of PowerShell, but other things maybe I'm not so good at. So, like you said earlier, you accomplish more as a team, and I'm very lucky that I have people that make up for my failings.
for sure. I can definitely relate to that. Everything you said, comparing yourselves, it never stops. I try and be like, okay, back in the day, I would have been so proud of what I'm doing now. And yeah, I still want to do more. And, I can compare myself to certain people and feel very inadequate. But, it's a long time journey. There's always going to be comparisons that can be made, but it's about enjoying where you are and appreciating progress relative to yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
And you said paying it forward, man. That's what I feel like I'm doing. I was fortunate to receive a lot of mentorship and help along the way to get to where I am. And it's all about paying it forward and sort of trying to be that resource that I wish I would have had, sort of thing. Even though I don't still exist in the past, kind of, if there is another me out there, and I think there's many people in different shapes and forms that are pretty similar that I'm trying to help out. But it just feels good. It feels, and it is, like you kind of mentioned earlier, it's a little bit self-serving. It's a great way to learn new things. It's a great way to feel a sense of belonging, to get value out of the skills that many of us have spent hundreds or thousands of hours honing, right? It's not fun to know all this stuff, be passionate about it, and then not be able to share that passion with others and pay it forward. I don't know. For me, it feels like an anti-pattern to not pay it forward in some way. It's just like part of the process. It's like built into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm so grateful to PowerShell.org and the DevOps Summit for running the OnRamp program. They paid for my flight, they paid for my hotel, bought my ticket, so I could go sit in a classroom with genius intellects and learn about PowerShell and DevOps. So I know I still have a long way to go before I can repay that. But like you've said many times, I think I've just got to figure out what the next step is for me. So, and for right now, it's being on your podcast. So I'll keep trying to repay that debt. But it's an incredible opportunity. I'm so grateful for all the chances and opportunities I've been given.
Same, man. It changed my career, my outlook, what I thought was possible for my career and life. Like being in a small town, I didn't even finish college all the way until I got a job in IT and just been running it up since then. So I was like, I'm just going to those people have skills that we just don't down here. And then I went there and I was like, yo, these are just a bunch of like people. And then I realized like, wow, I could maybe work at some of these cooler organizations and stuff like that. And then, to go along with that, these people who are so smart and who I respect so much and have like really learned from them and spent a lot of like hours at my keyboard with their blogs or with their content. And to be like, oh, I could do that sort of thing too. They're actually approachable, and yeah, it's such a great experience, man. And it's so cool that we got to share that sort of, right? I
Yeah.
got it one year, you got it. Well, yours was a little bit more of a hiccup situation because of the whole COVID thing kind of
Yeah.
pulling out the rug from you. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 100%. And I mean, you kind of blaze the trail so that I could follow in your path. And the part about you said everybody's down to earth and friendly. God, I really want to emphasize that. So this is beyond just on ramp track, but like the larger summit experience in general. Man, everybody was so nice. I just they were friendly and welcoming. It made me feel like I'm a you know just a smooth brain ape. But they made me feel like welcome. They do this thing where they never have a closed circle. So if everybody gathers together, there's always like a little Pac-Man mouth so that other people can walk up and join. It's not never exclusionary. They try to give everybody space. And I mean, where else are you going to go meet? Um, James Petty. Uh, just all kinds of PowerShell heavyweights in
yeah.
the community. You get to shake their hand and get kind of one-on-one interaction. It's incredible.
And I think that openness is a testament to both the organizers and the culture. Because even within your like onboarding documents for the conference, there is an emphasis on engaging, communicating, putting away the phone, walking into the conversations, and that sort of goes down all the way to just sort of the basic essence of the conference.
Yeah.
It's hard to not fit into that when a whole group of people, like when people get together, they kind of they kind of follow the pack. When the whole pack has good intentions and is open and is oftentimes very empathetic and good listeners and, not just speaking amongst themselves,
Yeah.
it's just such a great experience to feel welcome in that. Because oftentimes what I see is people at their orgs, they don't really feel that connected all the time. Or maybe they're just plugging away at PowerShell sort of by themselves. Maybe they're fighting internal political battles with different things. And then to be able to just go to a conference where you can talk to so many like-minded people who've experienced similar problems, hear their solutions, share your solutions. I'm excited. It's only 2 months away. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so I haven't been to a lot of conferences, and I feel like the DevOps Global Summit sort of ruined conferences for me because it was just such an amazing experience. I was already a PowerShell fanboy. Like I said, Andrew encouraged me to get into PowerShell, 5 years ago. But I've definitely taken the PowerShell blue pill now. Having been through OnRamp and just had that incredible experience.
Nice. That is quite the journey. But there was something you wanted to mention, and I think we talked to Phil Bossman about this. But so part of the whole on-ramp thing is some people go the extra mile. They wake up early as anything, the crack of dawn. They go on adventures led by Phil Bossman to different
Yeah.
places. And I think I convinced you to sign up. Like, hey, make the most of the trip. It's not that big of a deal. What happened with that situation? Because he took you on some kind of walk that went awry.
Yeah, so I'm really glad I get a chance to talk to you and defend myself against these accusations. Most of your listeners will already be familiar with Phil Bossman, from Research Triangle, PowerShell user group fame, and PowerShell icon. Really, if I'm being honest, he was on. I want to say it was his second appearance, but anyway, he was on one of the episodes. It was the PowerShell bar sessions where you're talking to a lot of people like Jeff Schramm and a lot of people that were at the conference, talking to them, just sort of like a mini episodes bundled together. So I want to preface this first by saying that Andrew was my DevOps Global Summit Sherpa, right? Because he had preceded me in the on-ramp program. He had been to Summit several times. He's like, listen, you got to check out this unofficial adventure club that Phil runs. And it was sold to me as some light aerobic activity. So that's sort of what I was going into, maybe a nice walk. And I'm from Florida, and I'm a flatlander, so we're not used to hills. So Phil was nice enough to take me along on this adventure. I went out into the wilderness. I was very happy to get the opportunity to see something besides just like the inside of a convention center while I was there. So we went out into the couple hours outside of town into the wilderness, And right from the start, it was I knew I was in trouble because we left the parking lot and it was like a 45-degree incline. So it was more than I bargained for, certainly. And that went on like that for probably a couple hundred yards. It felt like 1,000 yards. I don't know. It was just up and up and up. And then we got to a point where there was this like sheer rock face. It was, I mean, it was slick with the morning dew and really treacherous. And I'm like crawling on my hands and knees trying to scale this thing. And at that point, I was really questioning every decision I had made up to that point to get where I was. I'm hanging off the side of a mountain, spelunking with Phil. And I think it's worth mentioning also that with us, Michael Hammers, Microsoft MVP, and Charlie from Michigan, who's another PowerShell dev. So, I really was reconsidering everything that at that point. But once we got past that, I don't want to say it leveled off, but it wasn't quite as treacherous. Phil had indicated that I was, sandbagging there. I will say I wasn't always at the back of the pack, but Michael and Charlie were, springing up this thing like billy goats, so we're just doing my best to keep up. And at a certain point, I think Phil said it was 1,000 feet of elevation, right? 2.5-mile hike, which is a lot for me. And at a certain point, I think around 700 feet, I was the one that said, "Look, guys, we're not gonna summit. We got to get back." And I'm glad I did, because I think we just made it back in time to attend all the sessions. I want to say I'm quoted as saying worst decision I ever made or something like that when you guys said. So I don't recall saying that specifically. I won't deny it, but I will add a caveat that that Phil promised a memorable experience, and nothing solidifies a memory like PTSD from a traumatic event. So it sort of like tattoos that in your psyche. So it's definitely very memorable. But where else but Summit would you get the opportunity to go hiking with PowerShell MVPs and industry heavyweights? It was a beautiful hike. We got to see a lot of that Northwest nature that I've never even been past the Mississippi up to that point. So it was really cool. A lot of good photo opportunities. I think there maybe is one that got out of me on top of a rock or boulder. But yeah, so it was definitely not the worst decision I ever made. And if Phil would have me, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Really?
Let's summit this bad boy at Summit 2024 is what I say to Phil. Yeah.
Memories. Wow. So you're preparing to show up, Phil.
I need to start training now, but I don't know about show up, but I would be glad to go along. If I have any regret from that whole experience, is that I was so bushwhacked by the end of that thing that I wasn't able to go with him and Yap and Justin Grody when they went to the beach on the following day.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. So highly recommend. Summit experience in general is amazing, but it's really cool to get outside the city and see some of those awesome sites while you're there as well.
What were some of the talks that you enjoyed at Summit?
Oh man. Well, there's one in particular. This is going to sound like pandering, but there was one in particular that stood out in my mind.
Drum roll.
So drum roll. Yeah. One little anticipation there. So it was the one that you and Dave Carroll gave. And I think the title was "Your Code is Flawless, but How You Doing?" Something like that. So I just remember that having a real impact. And it was so, not just the talk, and the talk was great, but after the talk, a lot of the people that were attending stuck around, and it sort of sparked this really organic discussion, about mental health, about, taking care of yourself first, right? Because if you're not in good condition, then you're not going to be able to perform at your best. So it was really, really incredible to watch you at work, listen to Dave, and just be part of that crowd.
Nice. Glad you enjoyed that one.
Yeah, and another amazing thing about Summit is that they actually publish those videos to YouTube, so you can go back and watch Andrew's talk. After, if you're not able to attend or for whatever reason.
Yeah, a lot of great talks out there, and that's a good call. You mentioned earlier the hallway track. Mm-hmm. If you aren't able to get every little detail from a presentation while you're there, you totally can follow up later And honestly, the benefit about the conference is you can just talk to the speaker as well. If what they talked about is the exact issue you're having at work or is the exact solution you're looking for, you're able to follow up with them afterwards and have a nice casual chat with them. It's some of the social events or in between sessions. There's just a lot of opportunities for that organic collaboration. It's a very magical environment to be in. Gosh, dude, hindsight, man, look how far we've come. It's been such a fun journey.
Started at the bottom, now we're here.
That's right, man. Gainesville, Florida. Shout out Gainesville PowerShell user group. You've been with us the whole time. So
not everybody has an Andrew, at their disposal. Very fortunate that, I was able to learn and kind of grow with you. But that the PowerShell user group has reached way beyond Gainesville, right? We have people that remote in from all over, so definitely encourage people, whether it's the Research Triangle user group or one of the other fantastic PowerShell user groups, definitely encourage people if they're getting started or even already on their journey to participate.
Yeah, it was really cool. We had a college student show up who was an IT student to our user group about Git and GitHub. They wanted to learn more about Git. So
yeah,
it was really cool to see. And they're actually, I was surprised how many people from Gainesville were there last night because we get so many remote viewers. But speaking of which, February 28th, that's such a great day because you know why, Graham?
Why?
We have an in-person meetup for the PowerShell Gainesville user group. I think we might stream it on Zoom, but our focus for those talks is more on the in-person experience. So if you want to come by and check out the presenters and what they're talking about, it will be there. No guarantees on the audio quality or the responsiveness to chat, but we'll be there. And then we'll be back again for another virtual one 2 weeks following that. So look forward to that. I like, Graham, the cadence of having someone on the podcast when they have an upcoming meetup. So it's like we can talk about something and then they can really dive deep, hands-on, answer questions live, right? Like actually give a presentation on a certain topic like Sean did. Yeah. I like that little combo. I'm really trying to help that person trying to get into PowerShell, making things as approachable and welcoming as possible, because I think there's such a large audience out there that is in that beginner phase of things that really can benefit from some of that support and guidance and mentorship and sharing of knowledge and just sense of community, because it is hard to learn PowerShell for some. For some, it's very hard, especially if you don't have a programming background. There's a lot of concepts you got to wrap your head around, a lot of roadblocks you might run into, and having a supportive community with you along the journey makes it so much easier. For me, that was one of my big things I realized was like, you actually have to ask questions and get engaged in the community. You can't just suffer in silence. Yeah, you're smart. We're all smart, but you don't have to like prove it by doing everything yourself and just silently suffering at your keyboard.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's really well said. And I'm definitely a novice compared to the SMEs that you've had on the show before. Hopefully people are sick of hearing from all those experts and celebrities and want a layperson's perspective. But I'm really inspired by your story, by Adam Bacon's story, that you don't have to travel the conventional path. You don't have to go get a degree to get into tech. And if you're just starting out, persistence is key, right? Just keep working at it, keep growing, keep learning. Like you said, engage with the community, talk to those other really smart people in the PowerShell Discord, the PDQ Discord. Get that feedback, and then you're not just on an island, right? Trying to figure it out, reinvent the wheel, figure it all out for the first time yourself. You can benefit from all the great work that other people in the community are doing.
It's one brick at a time is how we're trying to build this wall. And back in the day, you've seen all the bricks I've laid, at least a bunch, especially early on. Like even just applying for the scholarship is a brick. It's hard to put yourself out there and actually go through an application process and write things about yourself and things like that. It's hard. And then, going and really making sure that I'm trying to be present while I'm at the conference, and then taking the next step, creating and publishing my first blog on the experience. That was nerve-wracking as all heck. And then writing blogs after that, very nerve-wracking. I thought, am I an absolute idiot out here writing things? And shout out to Josh King for being able to be a supportive mentor for me and say like, no, this is great, send it. Yeah. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Mr. Burnt Toast.
Mr. Burnt Toast himself, podcast guest.
Incredible.
I owe a lot to him and so many other people. Like without small amounts of support, like Fred getting on a call with me and looking at how to actually write PowerShell, and just all those steps along the way, all those small improvements, writing the first script, going forth and trying to do a module that was a little bit above my head. All those things sort of prepare you for doing some of the cool stuff later on. But you can't just jump to the deep end. You got to enjoy the process. Each little growth that you have, each challenge that you overcome, celebrate it, because there's going to be more, and you just got to settle into that journey.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways I'm still on the struggle bus. Einstein is credited with this quote that said, he failed 1,000 times when trying to create a light bulb, right? But he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I didn't fail once. I succeeded in identifying 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And I'm no Einstein, but I feel like, the persistence and the determination is really key to learning. If it doesn't come naturally to you, if you're not a genius level intellect like Justin Grody or James Brundage, maybe it takes a little longer for you, but don't give up. Once it clicks, like you're saying, once you get to look back and, a month ago, 6 months ago, where you were and see that progress, I feel like that really is a motivator to keep going.
Yeah, and if you haven't had experience getting high level or learning a hard, challenging skill before, you develop a certain amount of confidence and you learn a lot about yourself through the process in many ways, including how you learn best. And those are skills that you're going to take with you for the rest of your career, especially once you know PowerShell. What you're going to be doing is applying it to a bunch of different technologies. And as you can learn to upskill on these technologies, you'll be able to develop automations and get things sorted faster, and sort of start continuing to refine how you learn and understanding that. That was a big thing for my journey, was like learning how I learn.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll share this real quick story. So there was an initiative at one time to create a bear-proof trash can in Yellowstone National Park, and that failed. But one of the rangers was quoted as having said, "There's a significant overlap between the dumbest humans and the smartest bears." And I tell that because I feel like you don't have to be 140 IQ to learn PowerShell, right? You could be as dumb as me or dumber even. But if you're persistent and you don't give up, then you can learn and grow and progress, to uh, the highest levels.
I totally agree. I think that you don't need a massive IQ or type of intelligence to be able to learn hard skills, like challenging things. You just need that persistence and the ability to sort of take a big concept, break it into pieces that are consumable for you, and work through it. That's one thing I really try and echo, is like, I try and show that I'm not a genius and that kind of thing, so that people think that this stuff is emulatable, because it really is. Like, I genuinely believe that if people were to go through the same steps I've taken, they'd be in a pretty similar spot to me.
Yeah.
It's just making sure you go through and maybe have some goals or things you're trying to work forward to, and then actually go through and do it, which I'm hit or miss on that. Honestly, there are times in my career where I've written the blog posts and done the extra things, and there've been other times where I'm kind of overwhelmed and not doing that. And that's okay too. I think Jess Pomfret mentioned this on her episode, where whenever you're feeling the inspiration, go. And if you're not, that's okay. Take a step back and take care of yourself. And as some of you probably noticed on socials and stuff like that, I'm kind of feeling great. I'm kind of in go mode, trying to create new initiatives and create some sustainable things that I can continue doing, even when that meter falls down, when other things come up in life, when we get busy, when stresses happen. Life is a complicated thing for all of us, with many factors outside of work weighing into things.
Yeah, I'm okay at PowerShell, but maybe not so much at all the other stuff with life and everything. But
Same.
Some of my favorite advice I think you ever gave is learning is in the hands. You learn by doing, and even if you could just use PowerShell for simple things that you do every day, like navigating the file system or creating new files, things like that you just get the repetition, you start to get more comfortable with it, and then everything, the pieces, the bricks, as Andrew says, start to kind of fall into place.
Yep. One step at a time, though. You don't, Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. Take care of yourself along the journey too, because it can be, like you mentioned, it's easy to judge ourselves, and there's a lot of kind of negative things can slip in there as we're dealing with work and deadlines and stresses and outages and all these kinds of things. So just make sure you're taking care of yourself along the way, because you're going to do your best work when you are taken care of. That's a reminder for myself more than any. There's so many days when something as simple as, I know that going for a walk right now would be a great idea. And then I end up just sitting for 2 more hours working on the same kind of thing. Take care of yourself, drink that water, go for that walk.
That's one thing I love about your podcast, is that we all need to hear those things, right? Because even sitting here talking about it, maybe I don't do a great job of applying that information, like the talk that you and Dave gave. It was so packed full of good information like that about recognizing burnout and taking care of yourself first. And we need to be reminded, I think, from time to time to make sure that, oh, am I really doing that? Am I applying that in my day-to-day life? Chances are we could probably all do a little bit better with that.
Completely agree. Another big takeaway was like getting some good communication with your manager. Because I think that so many problems that we experience with work are often remedied with some form of manager involvement, depending on your role and ability to kind of be free. But I think a lot of times, if you're feeling burnout, that's a conversation that's probably a good one. Hopefully you have a good manager who's receptive.
Right.
Not everyone does. Yeah. It's very key.
I'm very lucky in that regard. Right.
Yeah.
But, maybe through your communication with the higher ups, then maybe you learn something about that environment. Maybe that's not the right place for you, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
The communication part is crucial no matter what the environment.
You out there deserve to have an employer who pays attention and cares about the psychological safety on their teams and in the culture of the company. And now that's a very challenging thing to do the bigger the organization gets, but you deserve to feel safe in your job. It's very hard to do creative work like writing PowerShell and solving things if you don't feel that psychological safety and you don't feel taken care of and you don't have extra energy. The things we're doing are pretty important. So we don't want to be out of our mind when we're doing it. We want to be present and not making perhaps mistakes.
Yeah, well said, right? We're not going to make the best decisions if we're in an elevated psychological state, if we're stressed out or in panic mode. So that really has wide-reaching implications, right? Just sometimes slow down, take a breath, realize that in most cases, lives aren't on the line. The tech can be stressful, but all you can really control is your reaction to it, right? Not necessarily the situation that you're in.
Yeah. It just helps to communicate. Even if you find out your manager isn't going to do anything, if you can communicate sort of where you're coming from, what your struggles are, whether that's dealing with like burnout type stuff, whether that's dealing with career advancement type stuff. I think there's a lot of people who want to see themselves with a different job, but they've never talked to their boss about what they'd like to see. They're just sort of hoping that one year they get promoted. I know I've fallen into that box, and just so many times in my career being assertive, whether that's reaching out to someone in the community to try and develop a relationship or get some help on something, or communicating with the manager, but being that just a little bit assertive is so helpful, because I think the way that the world works is it isn't going to work properly or sort of in the happy path if you're not vouching for yourself when possible, all the way down to making the work you do at work visible. You have to, if you're doing some automation, share something about it. If you've spent a lot of time on something and there's a takeaway, make that visible, especially if you're remote. It's very helpful to add context as to what you're working on. Sorry, I'm just feeling the high horse today. Can you tell?
Not at all. No. Well, these things are so important, right? Like you've had, PowerShell experts on talking about how they have imposter syndrome. And honestly, just hearing that, like if this guy gets it, then anybody can. And it really, I think it just drives home the point that we're just humans trying to make our way, and you got to give yourself space, right? You got to feel comfortable to take chances, experiment, and grow, and give yourself space to make mistakes, because if you're anything like me, you will make many of them.
Yep.
And that's part of the experience, right? The thing is to learn from those mistakes, to iterate on it and improve and continue to grow.
Yeah. I think that's one of the benefits of doing this podcast is I've seen people who, first year whenever I got to OnRamp and got to attend Summit, I was so nervous. I was so, like Jeff Hicks, for example, I looked up to him so much. I was so nervous to say hello Same thing with Jeffrey Snover and so many people in the community. I was just so intimidated. But then after a while, you realize, and after talking to them a few times, I'm like, yo, all these people I interview are pretty similar in the sense that they're human. Like they have a lot of the same human struggles and tendencies and challenges. It's just they've done a lot of stuff. They've built a really big brick wall one by one, and it looks massive from here.
Right.
But you sort of get a little peek behind the scenes, and you're like, oh, no, they just kind of have a good routine and have some good processes and have themselves figured out to a certain amount where they're able to get to this next level. Right. Not to say that, Jeff Hicks isn't a genius. He's just the one that came to mind as someone who I'm like, went from seeing as an absolute rock star, not a human, not relatable, like just too good at PowerShell to be the same as me. And now it's like, oh no, totally the same. I think if a lot of people would have taken the same steps that Jeff has taken and learned the same lessons, they'd be in a similar spot. And if they had the same passions, right? Teaching is public stuff is kind of a different interest set, but just in general, their skill level would be pretty similar.
Yeah.
We've been preachy today. I'm sorry. I feel like I need to hear this stuff so bad. So I'm like, I know there's other people out there.
Well, I don't mean to be an echo chamber. I mean, I know you've said a lot of the same stuff before, that's probably where I got it. It was from listening to the podcast, but it's just, it rings true and it's worth repeating, I think.
Yeah. Such a fun journey, man. How lucky are we to work in a job where not manual labor, we're able to use our brains, we're able to maybe listen to some music, consistently learn new things. So good for the brain. Make friends, be part of an awesome community that for me adds so much value outside of just like, hey, I know more PowerShell now. It's like I belong to something. There's other people who are experiencing the same challenges as me. I'm not alone. And then we get to do the podcast where people hear and we're like, yo, what's up? Listeners, hello. I'm so glad that we're on this journey together. It's so cool. And thanks to everyone who's reached out. I really feel like I have a better feel of who the audience is. If anyone ever wants to reach out, I'm Andrew Plotek on socials, or you could email me powershell@pdq.com and I'll get that. But really appreciate everyone who's reached out. If you have questions you want answered on air, we're happy to do that as well. Just good stuff all around, man. It's a magical feel in the air. I got Summit on the mind. I messaged my boss. I was like, hey, we got to get some special swag for Summit going. It's in 4 months.
Right.
And then I checked and I was like, oh my gosh, it's in 2 months. Good times. All right. So you have a bone to pick. So I do this thing at the end. I call it the shill, right? The shill of the ride, the power shill, if you will, something like that. What's up?
Look, I don't know if this is the appropriate forum to even bring this up. Like, I don't want you to mess with the format because whatever you're doing is working. I'm just amazed at all the success you've had. I mean, I'm not surprised that the community is awesome because I think maybe we knew that already, but that you highlight individual people in the community. You get so many listens every week. I'm just incredibly and constantly impressed by everything you're doing. I do take an issue with PowerShell. I love a good pun. But I think that the word shill kind of undercuts your genuine passion for PowerShell. Like I mentioned earlier, you started the PowerShell user group before you were a industry heavyweight and thought leader. So I feel like that passion and desire to spread the word and help people learn really is more grassroots and authentic than that word lends itself to. So, is PDQ a great product? Absolutely. So easy, IT's already done. But I think that it was just sort of a awesome alignment of your interests and their needs, and that they give you this platform to talk about PowerShell, which I think you would, if I know you at all, I think you would probably be talking about anyway. That was my 2 cents on it. I don't want you to change anything, but I think shill is a little tongue in cheek, right? It's not really what we're doing.
Yeah. It's definitely, I don't have any shill requirements, but I guess in the beginnings we felt kind of bad about like making it shilly, but I guess that kind of led into the joke. But I think now that Jordan's gone, there's no lead in, so maybe we'll change the name up to something else. Who knows? The power plug.
I like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll rethink that one.
Maybe we're
maybe
discussing.
just plug.
Yeah.
Just to plug at the just to plug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but awesome, man. Well, it's been super fun to watch your journey. I'm so proud of where you've come and where you're going, and you're going to Summit this year. It's going to be so exciting to meet you out there. Share a couple drinks, maybe do a bar session while we're out there.
Yeah, well, now that everybody knows that I've got the goods on you and know all your secrets from your early days, I feel like they're going to be buying me a lot more drinks. But I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to get the full global summit experience.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. To your point earlier, I'll just add this to the shill comments. The only thing I think about when it comes to like what I do is just helping sysadmins and people with PowerShell and doing operations tasks. If I'm helping that audience, I'm doing my job right. And I think that it's been really cool to see the podcast be able to help people and to hear those success stories. That's what I love the most, is being able to hear people didn't know about PowerShell. They got into it, and we've been doing the podcast for so long that they've had time to really grow, and now they're doing new things. I mean, Clayton Tiger comes to mind, Drew McClellan, where they start as people who are relatively novice, no public presence, and now they're blogging and sharing things and getting engaged and going to meetups and feeling the benefits of that. Very cool to be part of that community and that sort of process.
Yeah. So if that's the measure, is your influence and your reach to people that are just getting started and people that have already been using PowerShell, I'd say that you 100% are a success. Like I am very fortunate to have known you for a long time, and you've been that friend and mentor for me. But just seeing as you grow, seeing how you expand your reach, and now you're reaching people across the globe is absolutely incredible. And I'm constantly in awe of all of that.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. I know probably back in the day we talked about whenever I was working at IGY, like one day I might end up at PDQ. I know I told you pretty early on, but it's kind of a dream. And then there's just so much. It sometimes doesn't feel real, but such a blessing, man. Such a fun journey to be on. Really is a dream. I used to always say like, "Hey, how are you doing?" I'd be like, "I'm living the dream. It's not mine, but it's somebody's." Which now, this is sort of my dream in a lot of ways, and trying to figure out the new challenges and the new obstacles I want to bring up and go through has been sort of a journey for me. But I think I've settled on what I mentioned earlier, just really trying to help out. Because to me, something I mentioned on the podcast a lot, it's like the security posture of our world. If we can empower a bunch of sysadmins to have more free time to secure things, to configure things properly, the security posture of the world goes up. And I see so much room for improvement there. Just want to make sure that we're helping people along the way to get to that point, because we all benefit in so many ways when that happens. Maybe my email address and password won't be leaked like a million times in that world. Who knows? Probably still.
Yeah, isn't that what they say, right? A rising tide raises all boats in the harbor, right? So we learn from each other, and everyone benefits, and the world is a better place.
For sure. Awesome, Graham. Well, I want to tap back in to a few things.
Okay.
If PowerShell were a feature-length movie, not Disney, what would it be?
Oh man.
Feature length, of course.
Yeah.
No shorts.
Boy, you're really putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
I don't know how many blockbuster movies could live up to that
All right.
hype.
If PowerShell were a food item.
Maybe a multi-layered cake.
Ooh, yummy. Is it cake? Yes, it is. Awesome. Next question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself, say 5 years ago, pre-OnRamp, if you were to go back and give yourself one piece of advice that would have really helped you out, what would it be in your IT journey?
I don't know how insightful this is, but for me, I think the best advice I could have given my younger, dumber self is just to be patient. Realize that, Andrew or any other, big shot PowerShell user they didn't get there overnight, right? They, it was a long journey, and it took time. So just be patient, give yourself space, um, to grow and improve.
That's good advice. Now, can you recommend? We'll go 2. Can you give me 2 PowerShell modules you'd recommend to the audience at large?
Well, as I said earlier, a lot of the modules that I use day to day, may not be public, but as far as public modules go, God, there's so many good ones, which you've touched on before. So,
That's all right.
Import Excel is one that comes to mind. Um, there, let's see, you said 2.
Import Excel's a great one.
Yeah, or PS Framework is another one that really
is.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Very comprehensive.
You know that already, but those are 2 I can name.
Yeah, PS Framework's probably still running in your environment for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Graham, thank you so much. I'm going to give a little plug now. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another fantastic episode of the PowerShell podcast. We got to chat with Graham and learn all about his journey and take away some insights. And honestly, for me, I'm geeked up on how awesome PowerShell in the community is. And I can't wait for Summit this year. It's going to be great. Can't wait to see you there. I'll see you actually in 2 weeks at our Gainesville PowerShell meetup. If you want to join the inner circle, check out discord.gg/PDQ in the PowerShell scripting channel. I'll be there. What's up? Thanks to everybody who's joined that. You got some feedback, questions, really whatever. PowerShell@pdq.com. I love getting emails. I love meeting new people in the community. Please send an email. If you're still listening to us, if you're listening to us an hour into this, dang, you're a friend. You're a friend of the pod. I appreciate you listening. I know that long podcasts in this day and age can be challenging to listen to, right? Our attention spans are shorter and shorter. So if you make it this long, you're really in for the PowerShell journey. You're really bought in. So I appreciate that so much. I don't know if there's anything else I'm supposed to plug, but I'll say this, Graham. Thank you so much for joining us, man. I know we were both a little bit nervous for this one. It's a rosy Wednesday afternoon now. I was a little bit late with a doctor's appointment, but you stuck around. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate getting to chat with you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Any last shout outs you want to give?
Yeah, would you mind terribly? I know this is the Andrew show, but there were a couple people I wanted to just shout out.
Community, man. Shout them out.
All right. So, of course, Jeffrey Snover, the Shell Father. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. Don Jones, he had the PowerShell tool making series on YouTube. That's hugely influential for me.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, Month of Lunches and lots of other books as well. But James Petty, Missy Janusco, Kevin Marquette, and John Junell, everybody over at PowerShell.org, and that contributes to DevOps Global Summit, making that possible. You mentioned Josh King earlier, Stevie Coaster, James Ruskin, Corey Knox, Paul Broadwith, everybody that does engagement over at Chocolatey, Anthony Nocentino. How incredible is that? Pure Storage. I got to meet him last year at Summit. Of course, Jeff Hicks, Adil Lagari, Mike Pletcher, and Harit Diwali. Of course, you maybe from the other PowerShell podcast. I'm sure your audience
making hard shit. Yeah.
Yep. Sean Wheeler, which we saw last night. Mike freaking Robbins. Yes. Mikey Lombardi. Everybody at PowerShell Docs. We talked about. We didn't really get a chance to talk about, but the PowerShell dev team. So Stephen Bucher, Sydney Smith. And of course, now I'm drawing a complete blank.
Jason Helmick.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, yes, the legend, the other guy from like the original PowerShell videos, right?
He's great.
So he's so awesome. So really glad and thankful for everybody over there. Adam Bacon, we mentioned. Chris Dent in the PowerShell Discord. Drew MasterChef McClellan. Scott Lamond, Clayton L. Tigre, Tiger, Kevin Saflulu, David Richmond, SK, Kinney, What's My Name, Neil, Justin Imams, Nick Van Ogden, and Pierre Roman, of course, the Wired Canuck, not last or least anyway.
Well, those are some plugs right there. So shout outs to all of you.
I know I didn't get everybody. I mean, I basically just be going through your entire list of your previous guests, but there's just such an awesome community out there, and I'm really grateful to the people that I met at Summit, and the people that I interact with. They're still inspiring me and helping me on my journey to this day.
Awesome. Now, Graham, if people want to keep track of you, they want to reach out, they want to connect, is there a way, or are we going private, or what do we have out there in the public world?
I'm more of a lurker than a contributor, but I'm working on that. I do have a Twitter handle at the Power String. If you want to tweet me, I'll start tweeting. But yeah, I'm trying to improve and contribute more. But so far, my biggest contribution is just being on this podcast. So hoping this will just be a stepping stone.
And hey, who knows? The powerstring.github.io does exist. We'll see.
It does exist. It needs to be updated, but there is at least a GitHub in existence.
MK Docs, baby. Yes, awesome. Sir. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Really appreciate it. Shout out to everybody that Graham shouted out. You get one from me as well. I'll catch y'all next week.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.